is John Rose. I'm a senior advisor to the Vietnam War Commemoration Office in Washington, D.C. Today, I'm sitting virtually with Colonel Rick Kiernan, retired Army officer, served as a paratrooper, infantryman, and public affairs officer. We're here today to talk about support for the virtual National Vietnam War Veterans Day. Good afternoon, Rick.
Good afternoon, John. Thank you very much.
Rick, could you just take a moment and describe what you did in Vietnam as a fellow Vietnam veteran?
Yes, I can. 50 years ago, in March of '69, I was a first lieutenant and I joined MACV, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, as an advisor to the Vietnamese forces. I had been to Fort Bragg, learned the Vietnamese language, and I was on a 5-man team in the Duc Hoa district, which is about 35 kilometers northwest of Saigon, between Vietnam and Cambodia. As an advisor, we lived and ate and stayed with the Vietnamese for our time there. We were not on a base camp. We lived with the Vietnamese family, and we also coordinated with the local U.S. forces and with the State Department and also with the CIA. Our job was to assist the regional and popular forces as opposed to the regular Vietnamese forces, and to accompany them on operations, to medevac their wounded and casualties, and to assist them with other things besides tactical, such as the rice harvest, such as the education of the children, just the whole composite. And we saw the war through the eyes of the Vietnamese people.
Rick, it's interesting to hear you say this. I arrived in Vietnam also in March of 1969, was then sent to the AmeriCal Division. I started off with an air defense battalion that was very quickly removed, and I ended up with the 196th Infantry Brigade after that. So we share some experiences, at least from the time frame, but I was in a very different part of the country. I was way up north, right along the DMZ. Rick, March 29th has been set aside as a day to honor Vietnam War veterans. Is there a message that you would like to convey to our fellow colleagues as we celebrate and honor this day?
Yes, there is, John. I have found in working with that as I get around and interact and interface with Vietnam veterans and their families, that the Vietnam War was very unique in that we were the only war where we went as individuals and came home as individuals. And so I think, therefore, Vietnam veterans tend to be a little reticent, tend to be a little quiet, and sometimes you have to draw them out in a conversation because they were all individual experiences as compared to World War I, World War II, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the currents, because they trained as units, deployed as units, and came back as units. So when I walk through the Kennedy Airport with a duffel bag on March 2nd, 1969, and come back on March 3rd, 1970, you're dragging the same duffel bag, but it's just your personal experience. So what I have learned with the committee is that by going to these different communities and having the wonderful opportunity of speaking with fellow colleagues who served with you and I, John, I find they're more amenable to sharing their stories. But I think it's the individual deployment and redeployment that really has kept them quiet for all of these years.
Good. What would you consider your most memorable experience in working with Vietnam veterans since you've been back?
I would say probably here in Pennsylvania and Jersey was the ability to see the moving wall. And there are 4 or 5 of them that move around the country and is a scaled replica of the wall in Washington. And I have found with that as a backdrop, in speaking and engaging with the veterans, that moving wall at one of their events seems to be almost like a magnet and draws the people who attend the ceremony to that common touchstone. And I have found that to be the most effective communications caliber that I have seen as I go around.
Rick, you're part of the commemoration team that goes out to speak to various veterans groups and various reunions that bring together Vietnam vets. Is there any particular message that you would like to convey to them on today, March 29th?
I think as I go around and speak, when we talk about a war, any war, combat, current, past, there is a tendency, I think, to think of that combat angle, if you will. And I think what I have found is that it wasn't so a matter of courage, but I think all of the servicemen and women during that period, what they did was not so much for courage, but for love. The love of their country, the love for their fellow soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen. And I think that really is a bond that goes as long as our period is that we are commemorating.
Rick, how long have you been with the commemoration office?
I've been with them 2.5 years.
Any particular experience that really stands out to you at a given event or reunion?
Yes, I think one of the most moving ones, John, was that we had a moving wall up here early on 2 years ago, and after the ceremony, a Vietnamese gentleman who had been in the war as well went over to the wall, and he put a wreath, very, very willing and quick, to say how much he appreciated all the sacrifices and participation of the Americans in the war. And he has said he would not be here, his family and his colleagues would not be here in this country had it not been for the American presence in his country. He was very appreciative, and I felt that was a rather poignant moment for him to take the wreath and put it up by the moving wall.
You are absolutely right. Rick, thank you so very much for your time this afternoon.